Why do smart people make more money? Well, they get to where the edge of production is faster. So if you have 1,000 people and you rank order them by IQ, the smart people are going to come up with the new ideas first, and they're going to have more ideas, and they're going to strategize better. And you know, with an IQ of 90, which is 15% of the population, you think about that, it's 15% of the population. That's pretty much the threshold for reading instructions and being able to follow them. So, you know, and our society is increasingly sophisticated, so it's by no means obvious. You know, the liberals think, well, this society is unfair because there's unemployment, and the conservatives think, well, there's a job for everyone, but none of them think, well, there are massive, massive, massive differences in people's ability, far greater than anyone realizes, and that poses a structural problem. I had a client, and I got him a volunteer job, which is way harder than you think. You need a police check, for example. Like, it's harder to get a volunteer job than a real job. But we got him in a volunteer job, and he had to fold pieces of paper, letters. He worked at a charity. He had to fold pieces of paper in 3 so that he could put them inside envelopes. And then the letters, which were in a pile, had to be matched with the proper envelopes, which were also in a pile, but some of them were French and some of them were English, so the French ones had to be matched carefully to the French envelopes. And then if, you know, if there was one envelope out of order, well, then he had to figure out whether it was the papers that were out of order or the letters that were out of order. And then some of the letters had photographs attached to them, and you weren't supposed to bend the photographs, but they weren't always in the same place, so that meant you had to figure out how to fold the paper in 3 a bunch of different ways without creasing the photograph. And then the other thing is, and I never realized how difficult it is to put a piece of paper in an envelope till I watched someone who couldn't do it, and he probably had an IQ of about 80. You know, if you met him on the street, you wouldn't think anything different of him. He was a normal looking guy, had some other problems. I trained him to fold those damn papers for like 30 hours, and he got reasonably good at it. But you know, if you're good at it, and you probably all are, you fold it and the edges line up exactly, like really exactly. The tolerance is probably 1/2 millimeter, something like that. Then you do the second fold and the tolerance is the same. But let's imagine that the first fold you're out by 1/8 of an inch, and the second fold you're out by 1/8 of an inch, so it's a little crooked, and that means in total you're out by 1/4 of an inch, and then it won't fit in the damn envelope. So then you kind of crumple the envelope when you put it in there, and then it gets stuck in the sorting machine. And so he sweated blood trying to do that job, and they eventually planned to fire him. So imagine what that's like, eh? You know, you can't get a job, and then so you get a job at a charity as a volunteer, and a charity decides to fire you. You know, I mean, really, that's just... So I talked to the woman who was running it and suggested that that might be a little on the devastating side. I mean, she had her reasons. You know, he was always asking people questions about how to do his job, and you know, so that meant he was interfering with the productivity of other people, and it was genuine interference. I mean, she wasn't being mean, and it was her job to make sure the place did what it was supposed to. So you know, she was between a rock and a hard place. He eventually decided that the job wasn't for him, and relatively soon after that, I think it was too stressful, and he quit. So that solved that problem, except then he didn't have a job, which of course is a problem. It has a happy ending, this story, as far as I know. He got a dog because he was very lonesome, and that dog, man, having that guy train that dog, that was something else. That dog just, I think he lost 30 pounds while he was training that dog, because dogs, they're, you know, dominant, and he had to have a tussle with the dog to figure out who was in charge, and it's a lot of responsibility to have a dog. but he was pretty damn committed to that dog, and he managed it. And the things he went through to keep that dog, you just cannot possibly imagine. It was surreal, just like the nuclear missile silo. I mean, he had people following him around, informing on him because they thought he was abusing the dog, when in fact, because I watched, the dog was clearly abusing him. So he got a job helping a woman who trained dogs, and then he had a job. So hooray, you know, but it was like a miracle fundamentally. So anyways, the reason I'm telling you all this is because there was a reason for the Cold War. And the reason was that there's inequality, and there's different theories about how to address that inequality, and different theories about why it exists. And there was a Marxist theory about why it exists, which was roughly something like property equals theft, and those who have more have taken it from those who have less, which, you know, seems to me to eliminate any conceptualization that there isn't a fixed pot of money. You know, money expands actually as we become more technologically proficient, and lots of people who have money have it because they've generated a lot of wealth. I mean, Bill Gates is a great example of that, right? He popularized computing. He made it possible for everybody to have access to computing. It's like, it seems like a good for him, you know. And you could say the same thing about Steve Jobs, and maybe you'll be able to say the same thing about Elon Musk. And you know, these guys have tremendous resources at their disposal, but you know, they're not bathing in banknotes. You know, they're trying to continue to do things, and they use their money to do things. And